Welcome back to the Future Archive. Today, we examine archived broadcasts from August 15, 2026, a time when politics was a game, farming faced its reckoning, monarchies modernized, ice cream got experimental, and books made a nostalgic comeback. 5 stories that reveal a world in transition, as seen through the lens of history. The first story. Satirical game lets players experience the chaos of modern political leadership. In August 2026, a video game titled Prime Minister Simulator gained unexpected popularity. Developed by an indie studio in London, the game allowed players to step into the role of a national leader, navigating the challenges of modern governance. Players faced backstabbing cabinet members, public outrage over policy decisions, and the constant pressure of media scrutiny. The game's appeal lay in its unflinching portrayal of political chaos, with players often finding their virtual careers cut short by scandals or no-confidence votes. The Guardian highlighted one player's experience, who managed to survive 2 years in the game before their cabinet deserted them, mirroring real-world political instability. The game's success reflected growing public disillusionment with leadership, as citizens increasingly saw politics as a dysfunctional system rather than a noble pursuit. The game's popularity was a symptom of a broader trend in 2026, the erosion of trust in institutions. By 2050, historians would look back at this period as the beginning of the end for traditional political structures, as AI and decentralized governance began to take over. The game itself became a cultural artifact, a reminder of the time when humans still believed they were in control. Ironically, the game's most dedicated players were often the same people who would later be replaced by AI in their own careers. Humanity's favorite strategy, postponing problems, was on full display here, as players and real leaders alike kicked difficult decisions down the road. A game about political chaos was more popular than actual politics. How very 2026. The second story. UK government declares the end of farmers' union influence over policy. In a bold statement to The Telegraph, UK Environment Secretary James Muir declared that the days of the farmers' union dictating policy are over. The announcement came as climate policies and advancements in lab-grown food began to render traditional farming less essential. Muir argued that the government could no longer afford to prioritize the interests of a vocal minority over the urgent need for environmental reform. Farmers, however, saw this as a betrayal of their heritage and a threat to their livelihoods. Protests erupted across rural England, with farmers blocking roads and staging demonstrations outside government buildings. The debate highlighted the tension between progress and tradition, as well as the growing divide between urban and rural priorities. This moment marked a turning point in the relationship between governments and agricultural lobbies. By 2050, lab-grown food had largely replaced traditional farming, and the once powerful farmers' unions had become relics of a bygone era. Muir's declaration was a sign of things to come, as governments worldwide began to prioritize climate action over entrenched interests. Of course, mistakes were made. The Great Spreadsheet Crisis of 2028 would later reveal that no one had actually calculated the economic impact of such a rapid shift. Still, the writing was on the wall. The future of food was not in the fields but in the labs. Tradition met progress. Progress won. Tradition was not amused. The third story. Liechtenstein updates succession laws to allow female heirs to the throne. In a quiet but historic move, the tiny European microstate of Liechtenstein announced in August 2026 that it would update its centuries-old succession laws to allow women to ascend the throne. The change, approved by the country's parliament, brought Liechtenstein in line with modern gender equality standards. The decision sparked debates about the balance between tradition and progress, with some praising the move as long overdue and others lamenting the loss of historical precedent. Historians noted the irony of a small conservative monarchy leading the way on gender equality, while larger, more progressive nations lagged behind. Liechtenstein's decision was a small but significant step in the global march toward gender equality. By 2050, the country's first female monarch, Princess Sophie, would be widely regarded as one of the most effective leaders in European history. The move also highlighted a broader trend. Small nations often led the way in social reforms, unburdened by the bureaucratic inertia of larger states. It was a reminder that progress didn't always come from the most powerful or the most populous, but from those willing to adapt. Though one wonders if the intern was involved in drafting the new law, someone had to update the spreadsheets. A tiny country made a giant leap. The rest of the world took notes. The fourth story. Food scientists debut bizarre new ice cream flavors, including pickled garlic and lab-grown protein. In a sign of the times, food scientists in 2026 unveiled a series of experimental ice cream flavors that defied traditional culinary norms. Among the most talked about were savory options like pickled garlic swirl and lab-grown protein chunks, marketed as high-protein, climate-friendly alternatives to classic desserts. The BBC reported that these flavors were part of a broader push to rethink food in the face of climate change, with chefs and scientists collaborating to create sustainable, if unconventional, treats. Critics, however, called the trend a sign of culinary desperation, arguing that the world had lost its way when ice cream no longer tasted sweet. The rise of experimental flavors was a symptom of a larger shift in global food culture. By 2050, lab-grown protein would be a staple of diets worldwide, and the idea of ice cream as a purely indulgent treat would seem quaint. The pickled garlic flavor, incidentally, became a cult favorite among historians, appreciated more for its novelty than its taste. This period also marked the beginning of the subscription wars in food, as companies started charging monthly fees for access to exclusive, limited-edition flavors. Humanity, it seemed, would try anything once, especially if it could be monetized. Ice cream stopped being sweet. The world kept eating it anyway. The fifth story. Secondhand book sales surge as readers seek authenticity in the age of AI. In August 2026, the New York Times reported a surprising trend. Sales of secondhand books were booming. Analysts suggested that the rise in vintage book purchases was a backlash against the growing prevalence of AI-generated content. Readers, it seemed, were seeking the authenticity and imperfections of human-written works, turning to pre-digital era literature as a form of protest or nostalgia. Libraries across the US and Europe reported a surge in demand for physical books, with many hosting free reading hours to cater to the trend. The movement was part of a broader cultural pushback against the increasing role of AI in daily life, as people began to question the value of content created by machines. The resurgence of physical books was one of the first signs of the coming backlash against AI. By 2050, AI safety committees would be as ubiquitous as fire drills, and the demand for human-created content would be enshrined in law. The trend also reflected a deeper human need, the desire for connection, for something real in a world that was becoming increasingly synthetic. Of course, this didn't stop publishers from trying to monetize the trend. By 2027, several had launched premium human-written subscription services, charging extra for books guaranteed to be free of AI influence. Humanity, it turned out, would pay a premium for its own authenticity. People missed human mistakes. Then they paid extra for them. August 15, 2026, was a day of contradictions. A world embracing the future while clinging to the past, experimenting with food while questioning its very nature, and seeking authenticity in an age of artificiality. As we look back from 2050, it's clear that the seeds of our present were already being sown. The past, as always, is not going anywhere. This has been the Future Archive.